Let's say you asked someone out and they said no. How would you explain that? Why did they say no? How is this connected to you and what will happen the next time you ask someone out? The things we tell ourselves in these kinds of situations reveal a lot about the pattern and structure of our inner world and how helpful that is. Stay tuned to find out what that pattern is like for you. Hey everyone, welcome to Becoming an Expert at Self-Leadership. I'm Maika, a psychologist. Whenever something significant happens in our lives, we have our own personal way of explaining why it happened. Specifically, we find answers to these three questions. How permanent is this? How pervasive is this? And how personal is this? After a lot of research, the psychologist Martin Seligman found that people have very different ways of answering these questions. He calls these explanatory styles and says we can either have an optimistic or a pessimistic explanatory style. In his studies, he also found that this contributes to how healthy and successful a person is. If you have an optimistic explanatory style and good things happen, you will tend to assume that they are permanent, pervasive, and personal. So if you ask someone out and they say yes, you'll assume that this is a permanent situation. If I ever ask anyone else out again in the future, it'll probably also go well. And you also assume that this is a pervasive situation, meaning it spills over into other areas of life or other similar situations. So the upcoming first date, well, it'll probably also go well. And you also tend to explain this occurrence in a way that attributes why it happened internally, not externally. So the reason they said yes was because of the way you handled the situation and not because of an external factor like another person or the circumstances of the situation. You would think, well, I'm pretty likable and good at asking people out, so that's probably why they said yes. A pessimist who experiences the exact same success in asking someone out will explain this success completely differently. To them, this will not be a permanent situation, but a short-lived temporary exception. And they will assume that should I ever ask anyone else out again in the future, that person will surely say no. And this is also not pervasive. This is not positively connected to other areas of life or similar situations. So that first date, it's probably going to be really embarrassing for me. And they will also not explain it in a way that explains the success connected to internal personal factors. So the reason this went well was not because most of the time I'm charming and likable, but the reason this went well was because the other person was bored. They didn't have anything else going on that weekend. Now let's say asking someone out does not go well. They say no. The optimist and pessimist will again explain it completely differently. The optimist will think, well, that's not permanent. Next time I ask someone out, it might go well, who knows? It's likely that I'll be successful at some point. And this is not pervasive. This is not connected to other situations or other people. Let me call another friend and ask if they want to hang out. And this is not personal or not only personal. They don't know me, so the reason they said no can't be because something's fundamentally wrong with me. When a pessimist fails at asking someone out, they will explain this as a permanent situation. No one will ever say yes. As pervasive. No one else will want to spend time with me this weekend either. I'll end up all alone. And as personal. The reason they said no is because I'm not likable. Now, let's just take a step back and remind ourselves that all of this is all in our heads. The way we explain what happens in our life, success, failure, the explanation we choose is not determined by what actually happened, but by the setup of our inner world. Someone with the pessimistic explanatory style chooses to pick the worst possible explanation. Worst in the sense of what that means for them, for their future, their life, their emotions, their motivation, confidence, sense of self-worth. Okay, chooses is a pretty strong word. There is an unintentional component to this. We learn our explanatory style from our primary caregivers during childhood, and a lot of that happens unintentionally. So parents with the best intentions, who may see themselves as optimists or positive people, may unintentionally convey the explanatory style of a pessimist to their child. And once a certain explanatory style is rooted within us, that's what feels right to us. So at first, it's hard to feel good about a different explanatory style. So there is an unintentional component to this, the component of our upbringing, our mental habits, and what feels right in our body. But we can choose to change our explanatory style. It starts out with becoming aware of what our current explanatory style is like, what is happening in our mind, and then looking for the optimistic explanation, the optimist's answer to these 3 questions. And by the way, if you're uncomfortable with the term optimist, you can also call this style the optimistic realist, or something that is more balanced to you. And I just want to make it very clear that the point here is not to arrive at an explanatory style that blames failure on everybody else and a way of thinking that can't recognize our own room for improvement and growth. The optimist is able to see when they've messed up, and they don't shut their eyes in the face of real risk, but they also don't overdo it with seeing risk and doom where it's not. Martin Seligman calls this flexible optimism, which gives you more choice and influence over your explanations of events, which then gives you more agency, motivation, confidence, hope, enthusiasm, and so on. These different explanatory styles also make it easier or harder to recover from failure. Failure is painful for everyone. But with an optimistic explanatory style, you can process it and then move on. Whereas with the pessimistic explanatory style, the hurt and disappointment sticks with you and turns into a grudge or bitterness. Here are 3 questions Martin Seligman offers that you can ask yourself to figure out if you want to change your explanatory style. Number 1, do I get discouraged or overwhelmed easily? Number 2, do I get depressed or stressed more than I want to? And number 3, do I fail more than I want to? If you've noticed that you want to change something about your explanatory style, take it one step at a time. Next time something significant happens, write out the automatic and spontaneous answers that come to you to these 3 questions, and then see how much of the pessimistic explanatory style and how much of the optimistic explanatory style is inside those answers, and see where you could switch more into the pattern of the optimistic explanatory style. Also, take your first step towards the optimistic explanatory style right now. Someone with a pessimistic explanatory style would leave this video thinking, it's no use. I'm too deeply rooted in it and I'll never change. Maybe it's possible for other people to change their explanatory style after watching this video, but not me. And someone with a more optimistic explanatory style will think it's possible, slowly, step by step, with practice and lots of self-kindness, acceptance, and compassion. Also, if you found this look into the structure and patterns of your inner world interesting and you'd like to take a further look into your mental habits, check out my brand new course on limiting mental habits like catastrophizing, doomsday thinking, taking things too personally, being oriented around regret, and other ones. This is a topic that can change your life in powerful ways, and in the course you'll learn to recognize common limiting mental habits in yourself and how to transform them towards helpful and encouraging ones so that you can feel better, more motivated, confident, and joyful. For now, thanks for being here. Till next time, take care and remember to pay attention to how you explain things. It's very consequential.